Camelot, the legendary city of King Arthur. For centuries, readers have imagined Camelot as the shining court of knights, quests, and romance. But what if this mythical city wasn't entirely invented? What if Camelot was inspired by a real place hidden in the ruins of Britain? And what if it can still be traced today? In the stories of King Arthur, Camelot is the crown jewel, the royal capital where Arthur reigned and his knights gathered. Yet, despite the Arthurian legends being set in a historical world, most scholars dismiss Camelot as fiction, a later invention by French writers who expanded the Welsh tales. But does that rule out the possibility of a real inspiration? By tracing how medieval authors described Camelot, we might uncover whether it was rooted in a real location. Here's where the mystery deepens. Because what begins as a French invention soon grows into something people claimed they could actually see. To understand how this transformation happened, we need to examine why so many historians believe Camelot was purely fictional. Camelot does not appear in early British records. It's absent from the Historia Brittonum and from Welsh texts that mention Arthur. In fact, the name Camelot doesn't surface until the late 12th century. That's a significant gap in the sources. Centuries of silence where one might expect such a grand capital to at least be named. Its debut comes in Lancelot the Knight of the Cart, written by Chrétien de Troyes in the 1170s. In his story, Arthur leaves Caerleon and travels to Camelot on Ascension Day. This late appearance suggests Camelot was a literary invention. Like Lancelot, the name itself appears to be a French creation. Because of this, many see the search for a real Camelot as pointless, an attempt to locate a city that simply never existed. But then comes the twist. Readers after Chrétien began treating Camelot as if it were a real city. Suddenly, this mythical court had walls, a church, and a place on the map. The leap from literature to landscape had been made, and from then on, the myth would grow in surprising directions. The fact that the name Camelot appeared seemingly late doesn't automatically prove it was an invention. Tintagel, for example, wasn't tied to Arthur until the 12th century, yet it is undeniably real and archaeologically verified. The same applies to Arundel. A late reference doesn't mean the place itself was imaginary. History shows us again and again how legends cling to real stones and ruins. It's possible Chrétien drew inspiration from a real location, but gave it a new name. Authors often do this. A place might wear a mask in literature, but underneath, the bones of a real town can often be found. And here's where things get interesting. Evidence for a real Camelot comes from the 15th century publisher William Caxton. In his preface to Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur, Caxton describes Camelot's grand stone walls as still visible in Wales, visited by many people of his day. This doesn't prove Camelot's connection to Arthur, but it does show that Caxton thought of Camelot as a real physical place. He was writing for readers who might have seen it themselves, giving his claim even more weight. But what did Malory himself believe? The answer pushes us even closer to the heart of the mystery. In Le Morte d'Arthur, Malory writes that Camelot is Winchester in English. This was interpreted to mean that Camelot was located in Winchester, but historian David Nash Ford argued Malory was not identifying Camelot with Winchester, he was translating the Welsh name Caerwent. This distinction can be critical. Caxton had already placed Camelot in Wales. If Malory's Winchester was meant as a translation of Caerwent, not the English city, the two accounts align rather than conflict. It suggests that Malory may have been pointing to a real location all along. And suddenly, two threads, Caxton's ruins and Malory's Winchester, begin to weave together, a name in one account and ruins in another, both converging on the same Welsh landscape. Caerwent is a strong candidate for Camelot. Caxton said Camelot's stone walls were still visible, and Caerwent's Roman ruins would have impressed any medieval visitor. Imagine arriving in the valley and seeing the massive stone defenses, remnants of a once thriving Roman town standing tall against the Welsh hills. To a medieval traveler, these ruins would have seemed almost supernatural, silent guardians of a forgotten age. Arthur's legends were also closely tied to southeast Wales, with Caerleon often cited as one of his courts. Two sites near Caerleon stand out: Caerleon itself with its Roman amphitheater, and Caerwent with its vast stone defenses. Since medieval writers typically treated Caerleon and Camelot as distinct, Caerwent seems the more suitable fit. The evidence suggests that Caxton and Mallory envisioned Camelot as Caerwent. However, an even more compelling clue follows, one that connects the legendary Camelot to a specific named landmark. If you're enjoying unraveling the mystery of Camelot, this blend of legend and history, subscribing to The Collector is the easiest way to make sure you never miss these explorations. Your support keeps the search for history's hidden truths alive, and we're glad you're here to be a part of it. Now back to the trail of clues, because the next one ties Camelot to a very specific landmark. One detail recurs in medieval accounts. Camelot often had a church dedicated to Saint Stephen. Mallory includes this description, and other writers repeat it. Winchester never had such a church, but Caerwent did. Saint Stephen's church dates back to the early medieval period, possibly even the 6th century. This coincidence is striking. If Caerwent had the very church named in the legend, then perhaps it wasn't a coincidence at all. And once again, a name in the legend seems to match something still standing in Wales. Chrétien writes, King Arthur one Ascension Day had left Caerleon and held a most significant court in Camelot, with all the splendor appropriate to the day. If Arthur traveled from Caerleon to Camelot on the same day and still held court, Camelot had to be nearby. Again, Caerwent fits perfectly. It's within a day's journey on medieval roads. While Chrétien's description is brief, it's entirely consistent with the later references to Camelot's ruins and church. And this is where our detective trail comes full circle. Chrétien set down the first clue, Caxton saw ruins, and Mallory named a city. Together, these authors built the foundations of a legend. Each step pulls Camelot closer to reality. So, was Camelot pure invention, or rooted in reality? The first mention places it close to Caerleon. Caxton later insisted its walls still stood in Wales. Mallory's use of Winchester makes sense as a translation of Caerwent, and the mention of St. Stephen's Church aligns perfectly with Caerwent's own. Each clue builds upon the last, tightening the circle around Caerwent. What began as a French romance now points toward Roman ruins in Wales. The legend and the landscape intertwine so closely that it becomes difficult to separate story from stone. All this suggests that Camelot, as imagined by medieval writers, was not entirely a fantasy. Indeed, their descriptions point toward Caerwent, a real Roman town in Wales whose ruins still survive today. Perhaps Camelot was never fully real, nor fully imagined, but something in between. A legend anchored in stone where myth and memory blur together. That tension between invention and reality may be the very reason why Camelot continues to fascinate us today.